Taking the lead. Emma Bennison is the first person with disability to be the CEO of Arts Access Australia. Emma sat down with the previous CEO, Kate Larsen, to talk about disability leadership.
I'm Kate Larsen and I'm the outgoing CEO of Arts Access Australia, which is the peak body for arts and disability. I started as CEO of Arts Access Australia 18 months ago. It's a fantastic organisation and probably the best job I've ever had. But the thing I did slightly differently was to resign on the same day that I accepted the job. And that's because I believe really strongly that disabled people's organisations should be run by people who identify as someone with disability. And because I didn't feel that I could stay in that role. So my job over the last 18 months has been to do all sorts of different very fun things, but also to undertake to replace myself with a CEO who does identify in that way. So there was quite a negative reaction, mostly from non-disabled people who were quite dismissive and said, oh, you'll never find someone, which to me is just remarkable considering we're talking about nearly 20% of the Australian population. Then there was another group who really saw it as me being a martyr, so throwing myself on my own sword, taking one for the team or the greater cause, which was interesting to me because it's really just common sense. It's not an act of altruism. It's not a big deal, or I don't think that it should be a big deal. And I really think that other people in my situation should be working towards this if we're all moving towards self-advocacy. Then there was a slightly more disturbing bunch of people, though these comments came remarkably often, asking if I couldn't just stab myself in the eye or cut off a little finger and so make myself eligible to stay. And I'm pretty sure they were joking, but it was still quite disturbing. Overwhelmingly, though, people with disability were incredibly positive. They didn't make a big deal of it and just said, great, thanks. Wish more people were doing this kind of thing. I think the thing to remember is that it's not going to happen unless you make it happen. There's lots of really easy and simple things you can do, but until you actually start to do it, nothing's going to change. So where boards and management committees can make real differences is by looking at your inclusive employment policies, making sure your recruitment is accessible as possible, making sure you're supporting staff, whether they've identified as someone with disability or not, making all of those processes inclusive for everybody, but also by identifying gaps in your organisation, by perhaps setting targets for the number of people with disability that your organisation should be employing and working out how you can support them to move into more senior leadership positions. But you've got to actually take those first steps. I think succession planning at a CEO or senior management level is a really great place to start because it can happen over a period of time. You can recruit somebody to shadow you or as a deputy or as a trainee role, and it not only provides an opportunity for that person or increase the diversity of your workforce, but also just helps maintain the corporate history of that organisation. There are so many amazing, talented, highly educated, highly skilled people with disability out there who just are still coming up against barriers. All we have to do is take the barriers away. The thing is, as an Australian, I'm really embarrassed that our country ranks 21st out of the 29 OECD countries in terms of standard of living for people with disability. That's a national shame and something we all should be working towards.
I'm Emma Bennison. I'm the new CEO of Arts Access Australia. I'm very excited about having been offered the role of CEO. I am an artist myself. I'm a singer and a songwriter, and I am very proudly a blind person as well. There's definitely been the perception put to me from time to time that perhaps the appointment of a person with a disability to the role of CEO of Arts Access Australia, given the way that it's happened with Kate moving on quite publicly because she wants to see a person with disability appointed to the role, that might be tokenism, and that it might be a tokenistic type appointment. Well, what I would say to that is that I think that the proof is always in the pudding, and the way that the work is carried out, will be testament to the fact that no, it's not tokenism. I think it's fair to say that I do feel some pressure on me as the first person with disability to have been appointed to the role of CEO of Arts Access Australia, and also as one of a very small number of people to have been appointed as CEO of any arts and disability organisation in this country, and actually also as one of a very small group of people with disability to have been appointed as CEO of any organisation in Australia. So yeah, I think it's fair to say that there is some pressure on me to perform. I think the pressure on me is greater than what it would be if I wasn't a person with disability. I think some of that pressure comes from me because obviously I want to make sure that I make this opportunity count, not only for me, but for all people with disability who aspire to leadership roles in Australia, because this is a very exciting and unique opportunity that I've been given. So I don't want to waste it for myself or for anybody else. In the past, in other leadership roles that I've held, one of the things that I notice is that as people become more comfortable with me and with working with a person with disability in this kind of role, because that is quite unique, as I said, I think the pressure will diminish, and I think what will happen is that we will start to see some really positive change just by the fact that a person with disability is in the role and interacting at this level and working at this level every day, because I think that's the whole point of the importance of people with disability being in leadership roles, is the fact that there is that opportunity for people to make real cultural shifts from that position, more so than they can from the front desk. It's very clear from looking at the research and looking at the ABS statistics that employment of people with disability across the board is at incredibly low levels in Australia. And there are lots and lots of myths and misconceptions out there about what it takes to employ a person with disability, and the fact that it's just too hard. And I think there's also a lot of fear and doubt about this. I don't believe that everybody, all employers out there, are sitting there in their offices going, no, it's too hard, we can't be bothered. I don't believe that for a minute. I believe that what is actually happening is that people want very badly to do the right thing by a person with disability. They don't want to set a person up to fail, and they're worried about how they can make sure that they do the right thing and that they get it right. So I think employers also have very high expectations of themselves, and it sometimes can be a very daunting prospect to employ a person with disability. But I can honestly say that in my experience, both as an employee and as an employer of people with disability, it's 9 times out of 10 nowhere near as complex or difficult as what you might expect. The main barrier that people often present is about cost. How much will it cost? Will it be too expensive? And the short answer is generally no. Generally the modifications that need to be made are low cost or no cost. And in the cases where there is a cost involved, there are subsidies and programs available for modifying the workplace, and also in terms of providing support in the workplace, for example, Auslan interpreting assistance and those kinds of supports that people might need. So the cost is not generally as big an issue as people think. The other barrier which people often mention is, will the person be able to do the job to the same standard as a person without disability? And again, from my experience, the answer is yes. And if the person is unable to do the job to the same standard as a person without disability, then that's not usually because they have a disability. It's usually because they haven't had the training or the education that's required to do the job. And that's a whole other subject. Personally, I have my own commitment in this particular job to make sure that I am the first of a long line of people with disability running Arts Access Australia. I think that is important, and I don't think that it would be fair or right for me to allow that to let that go. So I would really like, as part of my succession planning process with the Board of Arts Access Australia, to do everything possible to ensure that this trend continues. And what I would also like to be able to do is to support other organisations, other arts and cultural organisations, to do the same, because I really firmly believe that until we start to make this cultural shift in management level roles, then it's going to be a very slow road to making real change in the Australian arts and cultural sector, in terms of lots of the other areas that we're working on, in terms of making sure that people with disability are visible on our screens, on our stages, in our galleries, at the centre of our arts and cultural practice on a daily basis, not just during Disability Action Week or on International Day of People with Disability. So I think it's at the centre of making real cultural change in the sector. So that's my call to action.
The really great thing about Emma is that she blows all of those arguments out of the water, in that she has years of experience as a senior leader in the arts. She's a fantastic practicing musician and artist herself, and of course she identifies as a person with disability. So all of the criticism that people had about tokenism and that we wouldn't be appointing someone to the role because of their skills just fall away. One of the other things that happened when I started talking publicly about why I was leaving was that a lot of other CEOs and managers would call me out of the blue and be a bit uncomfortable. It took me a while to work out what was going on, but they were kind of, prevaricating and talking around the point and being quite unnerved, and would eventually get round to asking, you don't mean me, do you? You don't think I should be resigning? And yet I just had to tell them that yeah, I think, if you're in a position where you can do yourself out of a job, where you can do your job by doing yourself out of a job, why wouldn't you? Why wouldn't you start right now? Go do it. Everyone should be doing it.
Taking the Lead was made by Arts Access Australia in 2012. For more information about Arts Access Australia, visit www.artsaccessaustralia.org.
Since when does life make sense? Since when does